Welcome to another episode of Think with a Drink. This is the weekly webinar series brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. This week, our title is The Ins and Outs of Disability Insurance, because let's face it, most of us have or get access to disability coverage, and the questions that we usually get are, should I take this? Do I need this? Just what does disability insurance do anyway? So those are the questions we're going to try to answer for you. So next one is just a real quick overview of a checklist before we get started, right? We're recording this, so just know that all of this is being recorded. There is the chat box, so you can drop questions into the chat box. And my co-pilot, who I'll introduce in a second, is here to answer or follow up on those questions, but he'll be chiming in as well. Speaking of your co-pilots for this presentation, my name is Tom Alessi. I am the president of the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. I have been in the financial services industry for almost 23 years now. I'm an investment advisor, which means that I act as a fiduciary whenever I'm giving guidance or advice to any of my clients. I'm going to bring my co-pilot. Craig, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Craig Richardson, Vice President of the ARIES Foundation. I've been in the financial services field for a little over 17 years now. And I work with individuals and small businesses to help them come up with a comprehensive plan and to help them have a better relationship with their money.
Tremendous. And like I said, Craig will be joining us as we go along here. We did mention that the Think with a Drink is brought to you by the ARIES Foundation for Financial Education. You can visit us at www.ariesfoundation.org. And the mission behind the ARIES Foundation is we are trying to help everyone have a better relationship with their money. Because understand it, whether or not you realize it, you are in a relationship with your money. And just like every other personal relationship that you might have, there are behaviors and emotional triggers that can cause us to act, like Craig and I like to say, a little irrationally when it comes to our finances. So the goal is really to try to help everybody have a better relationship, a better understanding of dealing with their money and finances. Next screen. Ooh. So just some disclosures for you here. So understand, the information and education we are trying to give is meant to be purely educational. The ARIES Foundation for Financial Education is a nonprofit. We share this information on our website. We share it on our YouTube channel. We now share it with our new partner, New TV. They're in Newton, Mass. You can check them out. And all we ask is that if you're going to share the information, that you do it in a purely educational manner. The ARIES Foundation is not affiliated with any broker-dealer or securities-related business, and we're not a registered investment advisor. Myself, Craig, the rest of the ARIES Foundation team highly recommends that if you ever have any questions, whether they are regarding legal, financial, or tax, that you seek out the help of a professional to get those answers. Moving on to the next one, because this brings us to the fun part of the evening. So we call this Think with a Drink. There you go, sir.
Awesome.
So one of the things with this is we know some of the information that we're sharing can be a little overwhelming, be a little daunting. So we want it to be done in a more casual and relaxed manner. And honestly, we can't think of a better way to do that than if we have something cold to sip on and imbibe along with when we're doing that. This one this evening is from our friends out in Worcester, Wormtown Brewery. And we figured, all right, we're at the end of summer, so we would do this is Wormtown Summer Ale. So we're going to imbibe on this.
Summer goes to September 20th, you know.
It does?
Yes, officially.
Not according to Sam Adams. Like they stopped making summer like in the middle of August, right? You know, so I'm not sure what they do. But anyway, this is Wormtown Summer Ale. So as we say to everybody, skål.
Skål.
Tastes like summer. Next screen, please. All right, so our agenda for this evening, we're going to touch on just what is disability coverage, why it's all about morbidity and not mortality, which is what happens with a lot of insurance. the different types of coverages that are available out there. And then one of the things that does happen is the student loan and disability and what happens with that. And then we'll go through and do a conclusion and follow up on everything. So next slide. All right, so what does disability coverage really do, right? Craig, you want to chime in on this in terms of, what is disability coverage meant to protect?
Well, it's meant to protect your income in case you can't work. A lot of times people think that they can work with one leg and one eye and never going to become disabled, and that's not going to happen to me. But actually, you have a better chance of becoming disabled than you do of dying during your working years up to age 65.
Right, absolutely. And one of the things with that, and just to chime in on, as Craig had started to say with this, is it doesn't really matter whether you're single, whether you're married, what the situation is. You are responsible for certain expenses in your daily living, your monthly living expenses, and whether those are, mortgage or rent payment, utilities, food. I mean food in the, the cabinets in the fridge, food in terms of the household. You are responsible, whether you're married, single, you're living with somebody, roommates, whatever the case may be. And what disability coverage is really intended to do is to make sure that you've got those expenses covered should you be out of work for whatever reason, like Craig was talking about, whether that's because you got disabled, because you got hurt, or you can't work for whatever reason. That at its core is what disability coverage is intended to do.
Right. Because if you become disabled, you actually still cost money.
Yes.
If you die, well, then you don't cost as much. So,
in the short term, right? In the long term, no. Next slide. Right? So this just asking the question and trying to figure out what makes sense for you when you look at, okay, if I can't work. Now, a lot of us went through this in 2020 because of the pandemic, right? Suddenly there wasn't, because of the shutdown, because of, the slowdown, because of the quarantine, we weren't able to work for a period of time. Had nothing to do with us unless you got COVID-19, but if you were just shut down, well, you ran into the situation of you are not able to work, so therefore you had to either use whatever money you had in the bank or find some other way to replenish those expenses. Take that forward now and think about it from the terms of if you did get COVID or got sick or hurt or couldn't work, how would you be able to handle that as far as paying for those monthly expenses? And that's really what disability at its core is meant to be. Next slide, because I think we asked the question. You can hit it. Like, what would you be able to do? Go ahead. Right, what would happen if you were unable to work for the next 9 to 12 months? And that, I think, is really for us the idea behind what disability insurance means for everyone, is to be thinking about, gee, what if I got sick? What if I got hurt? Am I able to cover those expenses for the next 9, 12 months, right? And
correct.
So, as far as the average length of a disability, do we?
Yeah, usually, when you think about a disability, a short-term disability, that could be, an illness. Usually, it could also be, you broke a leg, you broke an arm, you got into an auto accident. So you may be out 3 to 6 months.
Right.
Right. We plan for 9 to 12 months because you want to be conservative. Right. You want a chance to be able to get yourself back to work. You may not come back fully.
Right. Or you may have, there could be problems or things that occur with your recovery.
Right.
So it's great to say, gee, it's, the average is 3 to 6 months, but we know what happens with averages.
Right. They tend to be shorter or longer.
Yes. In terms of going through that. Next slide. Right. So as Craig was saying, this just talks about the likelihood of becoming disabled prior to age 67 versus as mortality. You're more likely to get hurt and have something happen than you are to die. Mm-hmm. And that's just the overwhelming
statistics.
Yes.
That's just the statistics. Yes.
And the reality of the situation. So You know, a lot of times we're going to talk in a second. We're going to go through the different types of disability and the coverages that are available and how it's there. But it's one of those whenever we're talking with anyone about the fundamental building blocks of a financial plan, you know, disability coverage is one of those. Health insurance, you know, life insurance, disability coverage. This is the foundation, because if something happened to you and you could not work and you got, you know, because you got disabled, any savings that you had, any retirement account you have, you're pretty much going to liquidate them. And you've probably seen or dealt with somebody who's gone through that and had to tap into those funds because they did not have some pool available like a disability income policy.
Well, the other thing, Tom, is you ask somebody, what is your biggest asset? What's the thing you have that's worth the most? What do people normally go to?
The house.
The house, right? That's got to be your biggest asset, right? If you don't own a house, it may be your car or some other major asset you think you own. But your major asset is your earning capability, right? If it's because how much money will you make over the course of your lifetime? And well, the issue is you always insure your house, right? You have to insure your car, at least in Massachusetts, right? You don't have a choice. But a lot of times we don't insure our biggest asset, which is our earning potential.
Yes.
Right? And so when we do get hurt, that money, you know, that money machine stops and there's nothing there to replace it. Well, the government is going to take care of us, right? And I'm sure we'll talk about that in the upcoming slides, right?
So if we could, next slide. Right, so, you know, one of the things that comes up a lot when we talk about this is that, you know, disability coverage, we think about, oh, I had an accident. That's what caused it. Like Craig said, you know, I broke a leg, a broken arm, something happened. But the reality is that most disability claims come from sickness, disease, illnesses versus accidents. And, you know, nobody can predict the future. Nobody knows what's going to happen. But you can see here that, you know, when you look at the slide behind us there, that injuries make up just about 10% of disability claims, where the other 90% come from those, again, illnesses, diseases, and other sicknesses that happen. So it's one thing to say, well, gee, I'm not really that accident prone, or I don't do any crazy behaviors. I'm not going to get into an accident type of thing, so why do I need that? Not the issue there. First off, if you've ever done anything around your house, more than likely it involved power tools, ladders, and moving heavy objects, right? So these are things that happen when we're just doing stuff around the house, which are all things that can cause us to be harmed. But the other is that you have these illnesses and other diseases that come into play that can cause disability, and the reason for us not to be able to return to work in the capacity that we want to.
The other thing too, Tom, before you go to the next slide, is right down at the bottom, you see 15% of that is caused sometimes by mental illness or mental disturbance. Now, a few years ago, they didn't even cover mental disability on disability insurance. Now they do. It's still limited, but that's opening up because you're finding that mental illness is becoming a much more socially acceptable issue. I mean, it should be because it is a real disability, but it's becoming more and more acknowledged.
Right. And just last, to follow up on the whole idea of what disability insurance really is about, right? It's just that. It's the idea of to try to think of this as, I'm responsible for X amount of the percentage of my household operating budget. And if I'm not able to work or perform or make a living, then I've got to have that income coming in somehow. And that's what disability is meant to do. Next slide. Okay, so the different types of disability coverage, right? So you've got group and you have individual. So you come in two separate sets. You've got group policies and then you've got individual policies. Sort of just like life insurance. You've got group and individual as far as that insurance is as well. They break down into two separate categories. I've got short-term and long-term. Now, short-term generally will go anywhere from immediate, 0, usually kicks in at about 7 days that you have to have been hurt or sick for that to happen. Long-term, generally for a group plan, kicks in at 90 days because usually the short-term policy only runs for 90 days.
No, a group plan would be something you get through work, right?
Correct.
Or some
Thank you.
organization or something along those lines?
You get it through an employer,
right?
So that is the employer, whether the employer is sponsoring it and allowing you to get it or the employer is paying for it. We'll talk about that in a second. Individual means that you're buying it yourself. As an individual, you are buying the policy. The reason there's an asterisk on the short term is that it pretty much does not exist anymore in the marketplace, that you can't go out as an individual and go buy individual short-term disability. You might be able to find it as an offshoot, some of the add-on policies. They're usually sickness or health type of thing that come along with that. But for the most part, unless you get it from an add-on, you really won't be able to find it. You can find individual long-term disability. Long-term disability will cover you from 91 days to usually age 65 or 67, depending on the policy that you were getting. It's going to give you a portion of your salary. Usually that number is somewhere around 60% or so, 55 to 65%, again, depending on the policy that you're getting. And like I said, it will last until whatever age it's deemed in there. That can be shorter. It can only have a payout that goes for 2 years or 5 years, but most policies long-term will carry you until what is deemed retirement age, 65 or 67.
Right, and what the industry assumes for an individual is that your short-term insurance is going to be your emergency reserve. That's something Tom and I talk a lot about in a lot of our other presentations, about having that emergency reserve put away, which we say is 3 to 9 months of money to pay your bills in case something like this should happen.
Next slide. So asking the question, so there's one for you. What's the most common reason for short-term disability?
Well, it wouldn't happen to me per se, but I would say pregnancy.
You'd think he knew that, or I'd asked him, and I hadn't, so there you go. But yes, next slide. So the most common reason of short-term disability, you can hit it again, is pregnancy. That's getting pregnant. That is the number one reason. So it's one of those things like thinking, man, what do I need short-term disability for? Well, it's there. So like we said, begins usually about 7 days for the claim, goes to 90 days. There are some policies that may run for 6 months, but it's usually meant to go in tandem with the long-term disability program. So your long-term disability usually kicks in at 91 days. So short-term usually runs for 90. Next slide.
Well, STD stands for short-term disability, right?
Short-term disability.
Okay, just want to make sure.
Yes. So now long-term disability. Again, you can hit the button there, right? If you get it through group, that's through your employer, that usually there is very little, if any, cost to you at all, right? A lot of times your employer will give it to you. However, if you get it through your employer and you are not paying for it, the benefit that you receive from your employer is taxable to you, right? And when we say portable, the term portable just means that if you separate from your service, you cannot take it with you. Portable means you can take it with you. Most disability policies are not portable. They don't allow you to then take that policy with you once you leave the employer.
So if you got great benefits at one employer and decide to leave the company and they don't offer it, you just...
At the next one...
Then you're out.
You're out. You don't have it then in that time. So then individual, right, they're going to go through just like any other insurance. They're going to figure out based on your age, based on your health, here's what you got. But if you're paying for it, those benefits are tax-free to you. This is now a tax-free benefit, and you own it. So it's portable. So if you decide to move employers, go to another place, go to another state, that goes with you. You always have it with you. So there's a trade-off there. You know, for Craig and I, when we talk to people, we're like, if your employer's giving it to you, that is absolutely great, because like we said, that's one of the fundamental building blocks. What happens for a lot of people, and we know coming up soon, you're going to get into open enrollment time periods, is they don't think about it. They don't look at it. They don't make the decision about, gee, should I have this? Should I not have this? So it's always worth having the conversation and taking a look at what you're being offered through your employer and to see if you've got that disability plan available to you and whether or not you can add on or pay for some of the extra benefit yourself. Some employers will allow you to do that.
The other thing to take in consideration too is the fact that, disability insurance is just like life insurance, and it's an underwritten product. It's dependent on your health. So let's say you work for an employer for 15, 20 years, and all of a sudden you separate from service, but you'd like to keep your disability, but the next employer doesn't offer it. Well, you may not have the option of buying individual if for some reason you have a health issue that precludes you. So sometimes it's good to have a wraparound policy as an individual when you're younger, so you have something in case.
Right, to take it with you, just so you have that portability option.
Well, to guarantee your health.
Right. So the one, you can hit the slide on this, the next one with that. So one of the things out there is, the biggest burden right now, certainly on millennials, Gen X, is student loan debt. And one of the things with student loan debt is you can have it waived if you are deemed total and fully disabled, which means that if you're partially disabled, that does not work, right? And also that it only applies to federal loans, not to
private loans.
Private loans, thank you. I blanked there, God bless, right? Private lenders have stricter rules. But here's the thing with that. So one of the things that you can do is there are disability providers out there who will add a rider on that says, we'll pay for your student loan debt if you get disabled during this time frame, if you are not fully and totally disabled. Like if you're only partially, or I'm going to return to work in a couple of months, they'll pay your student loan debt, because if you get disabled, that's another one of those expenses that you've got to pay for unless, like I said, you are deemed fully and totally disabled. So it's another thing for those people out there who might have some student loan debt to be taken a look at.
Well, the other thing that happens with disability is that sometimes people get into a situation where they become bankrupt, right? Because they can't pay their bills.
Right.
The issue with student loan debt, at least the federal debt, is that doesn't apply to bankruptcy. You're still stuck with that debt regardless.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Next slide. So one of the things we try to do at ARIES is try to give everyone a clear vision of the road ahead. We know that things change. It zigs, it zags, it goes all over the place. So we want to help you understand and sort of get past some of the hurdles that might be out there. Next slide.
We need to keep drinking. We're going to hit the road.
Yes. Right. So, for us, it's always about, failing to plan is planning to fail. So if you hit the button again, that, anytime you have questions or anything, you can certainly just reach out to us and ask questions. That's what we're trying to do. That's the idea behind the foundation. You can type yes into the chat box. Somebody will reach back out to you, and we're happy to try to answer any questions, help you have that better relationship with your money. Next one.
Or you can reach out to us through the ARIES Foundation.
Yes.
Yes.
So this is Craig and I in our more formal attire when we're out there in the world and doing things. It gives you our contact information. But just know we do a lot of these workshops out and about, and hopefully as COVID narrows down or Delta gets a little bit behind things, we'll be able to get out there and about. But that's just us having fun out there.
So this is pre-COVID, like when we used to shower and bathe regularly,
yes.
Right? Yeah, okay.
Next one. Right, so we do these on a weekly basis. So what we have is every Thursday we'll be doing these. You can reach out. As Craig said, you can look us up. It's www.ariesfoundation.org/events to see what's coming up, what's on tap for Think With a Drink. All right, so if you do have any, thanks for being part of the episode this evening. If you do ever have any questions, you can reach out. It's www.ariesfoundation.org, or you can just shoot us an email. It's info@ariesfoundation.org. But otherwise, we'll say thanks and have a great evening.